The protagonist was riding in a carriage, and a man told her that they would be there soon, and they arrived in the capital city of Veyron. The girl got up from the carriage and looked at the city. She hadn't been home for 16 years, and she was finally back here. The man said she had come a long way, but the girl replied that she didn't know what to say because he had more problems than she did and pulled 2 gold coins out of her purse. The man gave her his business card and said that if she needed a carriage, to press the lizard and he would be anywhere at any time. The protagonist said that sign went well with exotic faces. The man replied that he would take her to the immigration office. The girl looked around the office and thought that the atmosphere was the same as it was 16 years ago. Meanwhile, the man who was checking her documents called her and asked why she had come back. The girl said that she had a job here. The man said that the official ID would be reissued within a week. In the meantime, she could use her immigration card as a temporary ID card. Not that if she wants to, there is a service where her stuff will be delivered directly to her house for a small fee. The protagonist was very surprised because there was no such service before the man replied that you have a service created this service when the girl was leaving the country and that their country changed dramatically 10 years ago. The girl said that he could go to the National Library, and the man asked if she would really work there, and if that was true, if she was looking for a job at the National Library. She better find a job elsewhere, especially a lady like her doesn't need to work there. The girl asked what's wrong with it. She just came to work. The man said there's no problem with the library, not with the environment, and that she should not trust anyone in the library, then handed her a piece of paper and told her that the address should be written on the form below. The girl wrote her address and told him to deliver her luggage there. When the protagonist came to the place where the library was supposed to be, she was not there, and the girl decided to go back, but suddenly she saw the guys hitting on the girl, who obviously did not like it. The main character couldn't stay away, so she decided to approach them, thinking about why aristocrats are such assholes. The girl turned to the guys and said that she was passing by and couldn't go any further looking at this. A guy from the company responded, and why wouldn't she stop there? But the protagonist said she assumed it was a common thing for the local men to surround and intimidate a helpless girl, and if they don't get enough female attention, then let them look elsewhere, and to eventually get off the girl's back. The protagonist took her by the shoulders and offered to leave, but one of the guys who was in the company grabbed the girl's arm and she started to fall. But she was caught in time by a man, Sir Justin Hine, and asked what they were doing here. The main character thought of Justin looking like an aristocrat. Sir Benjamin asked Justin what brought him here at this hour. After all, he was ordered by His Highness to be on probation until his name was cleared. Daniel added that if he was seen here, the White Lion's loyalty to order would be questioned, and John confirmed Daniel's words and said that Justin had been caught not adhering to his probation before. Justin replied that his behavior had nothing to do with loyalty or the order he was following, and that they shouldn't try to push him so hard because he had received permission from His Majesty to leave the house anyway, so he's free to go out whenever he needs to. The main character thought about the fact that this Justin seems to have a high status, and maybe even higher than all these guys, and this whole situation is getting interesting. John replied that Justin should go do his business then and not disturb them. Justin replied that he is disturbing me because he has something to take care of here, after all the sight of a group of perverts that are clinging to a helpless girl to get what they want made him stop and decide to get rid of these guys from his sight, and the fact that he feels that his day will be ruined if he doesn't take care here. The main character thought that his demeanor is charming, and he is completely different from the average aristocrat and can babble on about whatever he wants. And maybe this man is only putting on the mask of an aristocrat, but he is definitely different. Benjamin asked if he was referring to them, and even if he was, they didn't force this girl into anything. Justin replied that he didn't say who he was talking about when he sees how they are stifled by a simple accusation. Not targeting them throws on the idea that they feel guilty, and these ladies have no intention of accepting their offers, so it would be nice if the girls left. Daniel asked if he was ordering them to do something, but Justin replied that it wasn't an order, but a little advice to prevent an unwanted fuss in the future. Daniel said with a sly grin that Justin must have misunderstood something, because he wasn't a captain or even a knight. Justin answered that he knew it well. That's why he was just giving advice to the boy. They asked him what would happen if they didn't follow his advice, and if he would pull out his sword, because Justin was in trouble after the first place where he acted with his sword. Then His Majesty the King put him on probation. Justin replied that it was true and he would not get his sword. His Majesty the King obliged him to be on probation and not to use his sword for a while. Benjamin replied that Sir Justin Hine officially challenges them, the Silverhawks, to a duel. The protagonist thought that if he is from the White Lions of the Silverhawks, then all is clear. There are 4 orders of chivalry in Veyron. The first is the Order of the White Lions, where people of any class or status are accepted, but with the highest level of skill. The second order of Silverhawks, where the difference in skills is great from the others, but includes only people from the highest society. The third order of Black Bears is slightly lower in skills than the White Lions because it consists of popular people in the capital who are not of noble descent. And finally, the fourth order of Crimson Wolves that consists of private bodyguards that are supposed to protect exclusively the royal family and high officials. These 4 knightly orders are the pride of Veyron as the nucleus of defense against external and internal threats. The envy that causes the orders is greater in the general population than in other countries, and the knights know this well. Due to this, the Knights of the Order of the Silver Hawk, often forgetting their own civic duties, they are idiots who use the importance and integrity of the order for their own gain. Meanwhile, the Silver Hawks drew their swords, and the girls are very scared the whole situation is starting to deteriorate. Justin said that they should hide their swords until he accepted their challenge and whether it was considered an exception to the rules. Daniel replied that Justin was the only one who wanted to start a fight, and there was no way they would stain their dignity like a white lion. Then they started attacking Justin, but he wasn't planning on agreeing to a duel, and somehow strangely hit him, and the girl who wanted to help him didn't realize what happened and what this knight did. The next guy swung right at Justin, but he in turn quickly stepped back and the sword didn't hit him. The sword fell out of the guy's hands and Justin hit him in the stomach and he fell to the floor. As Daniel approached him, Justin asked if he really wanted to continue and if they continued to make noise. People would definitely hear it, but Daniel wasn't going to back down, so Justin punched him right in the face and said he just wanted to get the gnat out of his face with the force. Daniel, holding his bloody nose, said that did Vice Captain Justin really think he was just going to get away with it? Justin replied that he had heard that they gentlemen had also committed indecent acts with another girl, and that is the reason why His Highness Chris is keeping an eye on all of them. Benjamin angrily replied that it won't just be forgotten, and Justine better watch out in the future. The main character thought that Justin is really the most interesting of all the knights and aristocrats that she saw. After the Silverhawks left, Justin took a basket of berries and handed it to the girl, who in turn thanked him for his help. Justin replied that it was a violation of 3 paragraphs in Section 2 on public health control and that it was illegal to sell food in public places without proper authorization and whether she had the right to sell this fruit. The girl was very worried because she didn't expect this to happen. Justin said that of course there are many food vendors in the city who sell food without a permit and whether she has the right to sell the fruit or not. The girl replied that in the market, none of the guards or knights tell these vendors, and word Justin replied that they just tactfully give a silent warning on selling food in a public place without any license is another story. The girl wanted to explain herself somehow, but Justin interrupted her and told her that she could go and that he would pretend he didn't see it. But it was just for this one time, but she would never and never tell anyone about what she saw today. The girl quickly ran away, and in her wake said that she was sorry for the incident, and she would never say anything to anyone. When the girl left, Justin approached the main character and asked her who she was. The girl said that she was a traveler passing by, and the guy said that if she was just a traveler, and that she should just mind her own business. And why is she getting into dangerous situations like this? The girl looked at him that apparently she had just gotten into it, and that he shouldn't focus on making sure that his words didn't end up making new enemies. And what if one day it turned against him? Justin asked if she had notified him about the future crime. The girl answered that not at all, because she was seeing him for the first time. And she was just worried about it, and she is also very grateful for helping her, but she could have dealt with such a problem herself, and she is able to defend herself and could have helped that girl as well. Justin asked her if she was saying that he shouldn't have gotten involved in that situation, and she smiled and said that he thought right and thought about the fact that she would never see him again to let him go. She mocked him a little more and said that she knew that the Knights of Veyron were quite popular, but she didn't think they were popular for reasons like that, and he must be very embarrassed. Being a knight like those three, or maybe he's no different than them. Justin asked what the girl meant. The protagonist replied that she was curious if she would piss him off, and how he would behave with her. The guy replied that she'd gone too far with her little game, and pinned her against the wall, and asked if she was sure she wouldn't regret it if something irreversible happened. The protagonist asked what would have to happen for her to regret. The guy leaned in, preparing to kiss her. But suddenly, they were noticed by the girl because she was embarrassed. The girl then asked Justin to move away from her and said that she thought that was enough. When he moved away, there was an awkward silence, and the girl said that his little joke had gone a bit far. But she would forgive him as she was an understanding person. Justin asked her if she really thought he was going to kiss her because he was just pretending. The girl said that she knew what he meant and that it was okay. But it's true that he was very rude, and she wasn't exactly nice to him either. So she offered to say that they were all living people, and maybe it was even fun to see a few armed knights attacking an unarmed man, and it's not something that is often shown, so she will review his stupidity this time as a thank you for a great show, and on that note said goodbye to him. As she left, Justin thought about how weird she was and how those glasses didn't suit her. The main character decided to visit the palace, not noticing that there are a lot of tourists around it as always. And in front of her revealed the greatest kind of dusty noble Catherine, and even considering that she saw him several times as a child. But even with all that, it seemed different now that she had grown up. When she approached the knights then, they asked that it was Dusty's pride and joy Catherine's palace, and they asked for her affiliation and the purpose of the visit. The girl replied that she was a graduate of Idanium Academy, and she had come to study the books belonging to the state library and pulled out her ID card. The knight looked at it and said that they were honored that the scholar was a Idanium Academy's eminent scholar is visiting this palace and asked to go inside, and added that to go to the library one must go to the main entrance. There, turn left, go straight, and then right, and there she will. We'll see the intersection if she gets lost. Then to feel free to ask people and they will show the way. However, to be honest, the library is understaffed, so he thinks it will be a bit hard to use the facility to its full potential, and for the girl to remember that. The protagonist replied that it was fine, and she had heard about it and thanked him for his attentiveness. When she was on her way to the library, she heard the sounds of fighting. But when she listened to the sounds, they immediately subsided. As the girl approached her destination, she saw the state library that was about to be closed, and suddenly she heard guys chattering. One guy turned to Kale and said that he said he was going to meet up weekend with the young lady of the Earl's family, and another guy asked if anyone wanted to go out for a drink after work. The girl thought about how it was no different than a street market or school during lunch all of a sudden. Who and a bunch of guys approached the Silverhawks she had met recently. Benjamin told the other guy that he had seen Justin Hain today and he had a face like he was about to die. At this point, one of the guys approached the girl and asked if she had a pass. The protagonist gave him the pass, and the guy said he looked real, and they went on their way. Looking at them, the girl asked herself, what are they doing going to the library like this? And they don't look like people who would sit down and start reading to broaden their horizons in knowledge of culture and art. The gentleman turned to Sir Victor and asked if they had not arrived yet, and if they had received some sort of delayed response because they had been sent a letter 2 weeks ago and must have just ignored it. And what Sir Victor thought about it, he replied that he would send another letter, and hurried out. Suddenly he heard Bessie's voice that the further away it got, the harder it was to keep in line. In the library, a woman was shouting at the boys to stop this mayhem, and if they gentlemen continue to behave like this, the rest of us will be uncomfortable. One of the boys asked her what she wanted to say, and who else besides them is using this place? Mrs. Inedith replied that it was because of the knights that were loafing about in the neighborhood so that other visitors couldn't get a footstep here at that moment. Bessie came into the library and heard, as the fellow says that the reason there are no visitors here is because it's dirty and there's no one in the librarian's vicinity. The woman replied that she didn't think he had any right to say that, but the man replied that they had said all the right things, not just using this unnecessary empty place to the fullest, and if they didn't come here, the place would become like an abandoned hunting lodge. The main character thought these guys were trash, Mrs. Inedith shouted that this is a public place and people that don't even show respect and at least a little manners in this place. She can't even call members of the public. The guy replied that she really thought so, but she wasn't even the manager of the place. She was just a humble caretaker, and she thought she could just yell at them and they would go away. Bessie replied that she would allow herself to disagree, and in the library, the librarian's words are the law that everyone must abide by. The guy scornfully looked at the girl and asked who she was. Bessie looked around and saw that the place was really very dirty with a lot of dust and cobwebs, and thought that it seems that she will have a mountain of work. But first, she needs to get rid of the problem that in front of her eyes, and said that if they were not here for reading, then she was asking to leave. Their boyfriend indignantly asked who she was to boss them around. The girl knew the guy would say that, so she took a little book and started in it that inside the reading room, no one but the staff has permission to open their mouths, and tore a sheet out of the notebook. And then all the guys noticed that they couldn't open their mouths. Bessie said the first rule of the library is to make sure they're not disturbing or a pleasant environment for other readers. Every user of the reading room is forbidden to enter into idle conversations or make loud noises. And if their heads on their shoulders are not just for decoration, she is sure they will understand what they are talking about, and to be more. It is clear her magic is activated after writing, which means that none of them can disobey any rule written on this paper, and if someone rudely tries to put their hands on the paper with the magic applied, they would be cursed by the witch. The boys were very frightened to hear this, and the girl turned to Mrs. Inedith and asked if she worked in the library. The woman replied that she was indeed a librarian and asked if she was really a witch. Bessie replied that there was no need to address her in such a respectful manner, and she was not so amazing that she should be spoken to with high esteem in front of others. Meanwhile, one of the boys grabbed his sword and ran at the protagonist, but suddenly, out of his own accord, he stopped, and his sword fell to the floor, and the boy in turn quickly ran outside. Mrs. Inedith saw on the floor a sheet from a notebook that said that anyone who tries to harm the manager or harm will start to dance strangely half naked. After that, the girl said that it seems that it's time for her to introduce herself properly and that they will work well together in the future. And from this day on, she will start working as the manager of the library, and her name is Bessie Ale. Meanwhile, on the street, the guys couldn't understand why Randolph was acting like that. That is, dancing half naked. Suddenly, Victor appeared and couldn't understand why there was so much noise around, and when he saw Randolph from the Silver Knights, he thought he should leave because he had a bad feeling, but he accidentally caught Bessie and wanted to apologize. But when he saw her, he was very surprised, and then he saw a picture of the guys trying to calm Randolph down. And he realized that Bessie had done it, because there was no other person who could do that, and asked her about it. And she showed him a rule sheet that said that no one but the staff dared to open their mouths in the library. Victor told her to stop it and get things back to normal, and then Bessie tore up the sheet, and then Randolph collapsed to the ground. Victor took a deep breath and said what was wrong with him. Bessie replied that he'd just fainted, and if he died just from dancing, she'd begin to question how well he'd practiced. Victor thought about the fact that it had been 16 years, but she hadn't changed, and he hoped that she would stop acting like this and at least become a little friendlier. Victor asked the girl that if she was here, did it mean that she wanted to take over as manager? Bessie said that she wasn't sure yet. After all, she needed confirmation. Victor asked what kind of confirmation they were talking about, and if it was a condition of the contract, it should have been mentioned in the letter. But the girl interrupted him and pulled out the letter telling him to introduce her. The girl's brother asked who to present it to. Bessie said she meant the man who had set the trap, that is Chris Van Duel, and asked him to take her to the Cretan, and she needed to hear the reason from him personally. Why he sent her that letter, or will ask her that through and that she can already say something without him. About a month ago, Chris told Victor that he had been telling him that he needed to try to do something about it. Victor asked what exactly he wanted him to do, but Chris said that why was he asking him about it? Again, and wasting air on those questions, and he was sure that Victor wasn't asking because he didn't understand the meaning of what he was saying. Victor replied that he is his escort knight. Chris replied that he knew that until now. Until he has resigned and left this palace, he will continue to be his knight, and of course he will not accept his resignation even if he wanted to. And so he won't even think about resigning, and he will pester him again and again until the end of time, and he will never abscond. Victor replied that he never thought of such a thing. Chris replied that he knows, but he is his attendant knight, and also he knows very well that the order he entrusted to him is inconvenient, and if he came back to tradition, it is definitely not the mission a knight should be on. But also, Chris can't do anything about it, to the point that the state library of the city of the entire nation for its great history and tradition is about to close. Victor asked that there really isn't anyone who can take over the position of manager. Chris stood up and said that there is no one, at least in this country, because someone might be annoyed if he did that. But he can't just close it down like that, and that he already has one possible candidate. Victor asked why there was all this discussion if he has a candidate. Chris said that's the problem, because the only person who can contact the candidate is Victor. The guy asked what he meant by saying that he was the only person that could talk to the candidate without raising suspicion. Chris asked why they wouldn't take his little sister and recommend her as the manager of the state library. Victor was shocked by this information and asked if His Highness was serious. Chris asked, has Victor ever seen him make such a silly joke? And why is he even asking such a thing? Victor asked His Highness to reconsider because his sister wasn't the right person for the position. Chris said that they can't discuss now whether the role is important or not. They have the problem of closing the library any minute now, and yet his sister has the right character traits. She will make a good impact on the library in a short time at least, he thinks so. Victor shouted and said that this will never happen, and he remembered a situation from his childhood, how he saw his sister standing among two boys, and they were crying, and probably she did something to them. So Victor said that his sister is the embodiment of evil and cruelty, neatly hidden in a human body and dressed in clothes, and she is really an evil woman if she really comes here then, instead of the expected good influence. He will care whether or not she made trouble around the library. Chris replied that she is, after all, his sister, and an amazing graduate student from a university of the nobility and upper classes. And most importantly, she is a good witch. In this world, magic is made only for women, and only a select few of them. In other words, only witches can use magic. Sometimes they can send calamities. Sometimes they control other people's minds. Sometimes they can bring herds of animals, and sometimes people from death. The work of both excites and delights. And there is one young witch who is granted a special power that only some have. This young witch has been given another name, Bessie Ale. Besides being a graduate of a top-tier university, she is a witch that has been given special magic, and Victor certainly doesn't think that his little sister lacks the skills and ability anyway. But he remembered how as a child he had told the demon that it was all her fault that her parents ended up like that, and she was a witch who brought bad luck and cursed everyone around her. The girl was living her dress and heard how she was a witch of bad luck, and always when this witch appeared in the village, disaster follows her. She cried at night and apologized to her parents that everything was like that. Victor wanted to say something, but Chris interrupted him and said that if she was the embodiment of evil and cruelty, neatly hidden in a human body and dressed in clothes, and he thought it would be more interesting that way. Victor replied that he didn't care what, but he didn't think Bessie was suited for such an important position, and he asked him to reconsider. Chris asked Victor if he remembers how many times librarians have left the state library. Victor replied that he remembers one librarian that left recently. She turned 45 this year, and she took care of her the whole time. Chris replied that that was true, but did he know that there were many librarians that had worked at least last year, and did he know why they had all left, and she was the only one left? Victor suggested that most likely they left because of the Order of the Silver Hawk. The state library that is on the verge of closing has a large garden behind, and several buildings on the sides that reveal beautiful design and architecture, but the number of library users has started to decline. Many people began to say that the size of the library should be reduced. Those who constantly asked for a place to train were especially active. Silverhawk Squad asked the loudest about the request to close the library, and eventually the Silverhawk started to remove one side of the library premises and successfully remodeled it into their own training space, and it would be great if they would have stopped there, but the real problem started here. After the Silverhawk Squad built a training room next to the library, the knights started to get rougher and wanted their own main building. They decided that the Order of White Lions were their rivals on their own, and felt like losers because of the smaller size of the training room. Then they started using different tricks, wanting more. They would flirt with the young librarians and create a scandal accusing them and putting them out of work, and then they would leave. And when most of the women left, the next to suffer were the men who were bullied and humiliated, so the librarians left too. In the end, there was only one middle-aged librarian left to work there, but their atrocities didn't stop. Knights could come to the library reading room stinking, with sweat dripping from their workouts, making readers run away from the room in disgust. The further they disturbed people, the less they started to come. In the end, no one came anymore. It ended with a request from the nobles to close the state library. Victor asked who these people were that agreed with the closure. Chris replied that Count Sidnarius, Marquis Ashel, and a bunch of other classes. Victor remarked that they all seemed to be on close terms with the Silver Hawk. Chris replied that that's what they said, and they said that if he wasn't going to close the library, he should at least kick out Sir Hines, who had been involved in an incident recently. Victor asked if he was talking about Justin Hine. Justin Hine is that man. Because of his brilliant swordsmanship skills that even foreign kings envied, he became the youngest vice captain of the Order of White Lions. He is the youngest son of the Hine family. One of the two greatest noble families in Veyron, the Hine family has a very close relationship with House Van Duel. Chris said they are asking for this because they know he can't do either, and it's all actually very problematic. The Order of the Silver Hawk is an order of chivalry whose members belong to many noble families, because of which there are so many problems with them, and Chris will never let himself be bothered by these demands. After all, the Silver Hawk acts in their own way, bullying others and doing whatever they want. And Chris needs a group of people to teach them a lesson, and he doesn't need them to be captured and tied up. He needs someone who can be on the same level as them, so they're too busy dealing with each other. Victor said that his little sister wasn't the type of person who would comply, and he was sure that she would turn down the offer. Chris replied that it was a good thing that in this country, the streets were filled with stores filled with delicious sweets, and if that was the case, he was sure that they would be able to please her refined tastes. Victor replied that he was right, and his sister did indeed have a weakness for sweets. But how did His Majesty find out about it? Chris gave him a letter and told him to send Bessie an offer, and she could choose any condition for the job, no matter how she would run the library. Let only save it from closing down. As long as she would be in the Veyron, and she could eat any dessert in every town in the country as she wished. And Chris thinks that this is an extremely unprecedented contract, and what he is sure it will really make his freedom-loving and unprecedented witch to take the job. Victor thought about the fact that there seems to be a storm brewing, or rather a storm called a witch, and that Chris has given him a very strange assignment, and maybe this time he will give in with this knighthood or something. When Victor came out, his colleague told him that the symptom of anxiety that he feels all the time, if it is caused by a woman, it means lovesickness, and if from a man, it is anger, and that no one chooses their parents, and laughed. Victor replied that also he can't choose who will be his sister, and in all this time she hasn't written him a line in response to letters. Could she have traveled all this way because he called? Or she called him again, just ignoring him, and that would be the end of it. But suddenly his musings were interrupted by a voice saying what nonsense Sir Justin was talking about. Victor was interested in this conversation, so he decided to eavesdrop because Justin is the vice captain who is on probation. Justin said that the gentlemen are too busy molesting women and skipping training. So what do they need a training area for? The Silver Hawk Knight angrily asked what he said. Justin replied that a knight doesn't prove his strength and skills by constantly pointing to the order he belongs to. And he also doesn't prove what he's worth by building a big training place, not being so obsessed with those things. The knight tells Justin that he just insulted them, that is the Order of the Silver Hawk, and offers to get him his sword. Justin that this is impossible, and he knows that the king has forbidden him to carry a sword, and to begin with challenging a man on probation to a duel is extremely futile and foolish. Either his big head is completely empty, either he already knows this deliberately, tried to commit treason towards the prince's crowns. Knight grabbed Justin by the blouse and only asked what he said, but suddenly Victor intervened and asked what they were doing here. Justin said he was His Highness's personal guard, but since Victor is still here, does that mean he's off duty today? That is not true. and he is off for personal reasons for a little while today, and asked why Vice Captain Justin was here. The knight let Justin go and walked away with an angry face. Victor told Justin that he was still apparently the same, and he agreed. Victor asked why he was here. Justin said that these men still have total contempt in their eyes when they look at him. Since most of the members of the Order of the Silverhawk were nobles and aristocrats, they had come to deeply hate knights with commoner origins. And of course, Victor had risen in the ranks and had exceptional skills. Exceptional skills, while being one of the commoners, became a prime target for their hatred. Victor replied that he had gotten used to it. Justin told him not to get used to such things, and it was wrong for a skilled knight like him to accept all the scorn from the likes of them. And at this point, Victor thought about it, and remembered that Sir Justin's friend of Sir Justin's low birth, he had been stripped of his knighthood and forcibly exiled from the capital, and given that Victor was in the same order with him. If he went out with Justin on the same battlefield, he would be relieved to rely on him because of his strong sense of justice. Justin said that all those men were weaker than Victor, and he could easily bring them to their feet if he wanted to, and make sure those smug bastards that abused their status didn't come to hell, and it would be a wise decision to teach them a lesson or two. Victor thanked Justin for bothering him and said that he was fine, and asked what had brought him here. Justin replied that he was here to meet with the head of the knights for a little while. Victor thought a moment, not sure, that it was possible on probation, and said that he wouldn't be concerned if he came. Justin replied that all that was required of Sir was to keep quiet about it, and Victor didn't need to worry. He would come home one day and stay there and not be inconvenienced. Victor asked if now wasn't the best time to leave. Justin agreed with him. Justin's ruthless behavior was not caused by the sense of power that the nobles and aristocrats usually feel. He's a man who won't hesitate to do something he thinks is right. Justin said that he would leave when he had accomplished what was on his agenda. Victor asked what he meant by that, but Justin didn't answer, and just walked away. And Victor noticed the direction he'd gone, and was shocked by it, and thought about wanting to assume that he hadn't heard it. And considering his bad luck with his boss and sister, you could say Victor is lucky since he didn't get a subordinate like him. Justin Hine really acts and behaves like a volcano. If he looks calm often, when he explodes, nothing can stop him like an erupting volcano, and interestingly, like a knight. Like a volcano would meet his sister like a raging typhoon. But suddenly he stopped himself at that thought, thinking about what he was thinking about. A volcanic eruption and a typhoon is really the worst combination of all possible disasters. And he shouldn't think of it as something fun, but more than any other, it's a disaster. It would be the worst calamity to befall mankind. But in the end, they have no reason to meet, so everything should be okay. But for some reason, Victor was beginning to vaguely feel uneasy and thought about not thinking much about it. In the most prestigious academy in the world, Idanium, in the student lounge, sat Bessie. The students around her asked, "What is the lady lying here again?" One of the guys asked, and was asked to cover his legs because they were on display. Bessie called him Jean and rolled her eyes and looked at him. Afterward, she asked Jean if he said he wasn't coming here today. Jean gave her the letter, and the girl asked what it was. The guy said it was a letter that was addressed to her. Bessie asked where it was from, and Jean said it was a letter from the Veyron. The girl took the letter and saw that it was written on it that it was from Victor, that is her brother. Jean asked if she knew who had sent her the letter and if it might be from home. Bessie tore up the letter and answered that it was both, yes and no. Jean asked what kind of answer that was, and if it came from her house, then it was from home, and if it didn't, then it wasn't. The girl replied that it was indeed a letter from home, but it was sent by her brother. But he had not sent her letters for a long time, and she was very much surprised that this letter was from him. Bessie began to read the letters. She took one leaf and threw it away, saying that it was boring, and gave the letters to Jean, who asked why she had given them to him. The girl replied that she wasn't sure what it said, and the explanation was too long, and it was clear that it was written by an amateur, so Bessie asked him to read and retell it to her. Jean asked what he had to read her letter for. Replied that if he didn't want to, that he should just take it and light the fireplace with those letters. Pity asked how long it had been at all since she had been sent letters from home. Bessie thought a moment and said she should count it, and she hadn't gotten a letter from her brother since she arrived here. When she was 10 years old after she left that place and went off to meet the night and the white moon, she never saw her brother again. Jean said that she was now 26 years old, so it had been 16 years. The girl answered that approximately so, and in any case to Jean just to read these letters. When the guy started reading, he was shocked. Bessie said that if he read it, he should retell it to her in one sentence. Jean asked that how could he retell it in one sentence, but he still tried and said that the letter said that they were offering her to be the manager of the Veyron State Library. Everyone in the room was very surprised to hear this news. Then Bessie told him to retell it in 2 sentences as well. Jean replied that the Veyron State Library is on the verge of closing right now, and the manager's position is just vacant, and they want Bessie to become the manager of the library and also hope to bring it back to its former glory. The girl wondered what kind of stunt her brother was up to, and these guys and them. She took the letter from Jean and began to read it, for her brother was not the kind of man who would say such things for her benefit. And after all, he was too hostile to Bessie. And even considering she didn't do anything to him, and all she did was make a little joke on him and make him go and apologize to someone at home because she made faces at their kids and they cried. Jean laughed and said this is where the girl is very wrong and told her to listen to him. Bessie replied that she listened to him carefully. The guy asked if the girl would now go back to the Veyron. Bessie replied, "Why would she do that?" Jean said that because her older brother was inviting her to be the manager of the house as well. The girl replied that she didn't want to. Jean replied that how could she not want it with such good conditions, as she would have a very flexible schedule, she would be considered one of the top government and would have a pension, and the other benefits of a civil servant, and that's the minimum she can get in this profession. And if she can save the library from closing and increase the number of visitors by more than 30 people, the girl will get a high salary and an extra budget to run the library. Bessie thought that all this sounds strange, and there must be someone behind all this, and wondered who the Emperor of Veyron and his cronies were now. But suddenly a thought struck her, that if the letter was from Veyron, that meant Chris had written it, and at that moment she took and tore up the letter, saying that she would not accept this offer since she realized who was behind it, and this nonsense should definitely burn in the fireplace. And for Jean to take that letter and get the hell out, pushing it with her feet in the process. The guy told her to wait a minute and let him at least finish because there's the most amazing part, and he said if she took the position of manager, she could have all the desserts she wanted in the Veyron, and really, even though the lady had a sweet tooth, she'd never go for it. But after Bessie heard this, she jumped up from the couch and said she would. At this suggestion, Jean restlessly asked if she was sure, and if just because she would be allowed to eat desserts, she would agree to this proposal. The girl replied that Jean should listen to her carefully and that it is called a trap. The guy asked what she was talking about. Bessie replied that even though her brother was one of the people who sent the letter, the offer came from another person who wants to give her a job, a public library that is about to close. And it's obvious from their offer, even though she doesn't know their intentions. If they made her such an offer, it means they want to get her to come back at any cost, and the reason written here must have another motive, for them to decide to take her on this post. Jean asked that if this is really the case, then shouldn't she be careful? She really needs to think it over. The girl replied that he didn't think the problem would be solved if she just thought it over. She will just think it over. And for starters, about her brother, even if it's hard to believe he is one of the successful elite knights. And that means that this person who ordered her brother to write to her must be of a higher status. So if she ignores this problem, they will definitely find a way to solve it. This problem, they will definitely find another way, and before that happens, she needs to move. And the fact that it's a trap on the beast is just an effort by the enemy to lure her into their evil plans. And this is already very interesting. And instead of digging up the enemy's trap, she'd rather tear it apart. Jean thought of the lady as a cruel and brutal witch for whom everything is troublesome, and she is one who doesn't shy away from her tears every hurdle. On her road is shattered, and Jean has no idea who could come up with such a plan. Even suicide would be less painful. So Jean replied that in that case, the Bessie would have to give them an answer and offered to bring her a paper. The girl answered that she didn't need paper. The guy replied that if she didn't need sheets, she would have to write her answer on notebook paper. and that wasn't good. Bessie said that she won't answer, and there's no need because the city is right now. And accordingly, she would go and get ready right away. Jean was surprised at the girl's quick decision, and the girl asked if he would help her. And the boy in turn said that of course he would, but that he would be a little lonely. Bessie asked if he was sad that she was leaving, and Jean said that he was indeed a little sad. It was already night, but Bessie had just gathered most of the research materials, and all that was left was to throw out the trash, and she would finally be able to leave tomorrow. Suddenly, the girl looked out the window and noticed that it was a full moon tonight, and she would finally be coming home after 16 years, and she had such a hard time when she was exiled to a town full of witches called Bright Night under a white moon. 16 years ago, as Victor slept, the girl said goodbye to him as she was leaving. Then she noticed that the day she left home was a little strange, and the moon was shining unusually bright like a scorching sun. And being an ordinary child, the adventure was her only chance to save herself. There was magic she didn't know how to use. In one village, she was even called a homeless orphan and even accused of being a thief. In another place, she was attacked by wild dogs that nearly killed her for lack of food. She was starving and shaking in the streets. But beyond that, the memory she couldn't forget was the time she was caught by a human trafficking syndicate. And that's when she met an angel. Bessie was tied up, and she found a piece of glass that she could use to cut the ropes on her hands and thought that she should hurry up and get out before she was caught again. But suddenly she heard some rustling and turned around. The girl saw a bag behind her that was rolling on its own, and Bessie realized that another child was here, but the exit was across from her, and if she helped the child, she might get caught again. But this child probably has a family, which is looking everywhere for him. So after looking around, she decided to help the child get out. Bessie took a knife from the table and cut the ropes that held the bag tight. But at that moment, the kidnappers came and threw her against the wall when they saw her open the bag. They wondered how she got out and kicked her, saying that she was small trash. Then they grabbed her by her dress and slammed her head against the wall, asking if she wanted trouble and wanted to die because no one cared about the orphan. And she was going to die anyway, and so he started strangling her. And if Bessie had known it would end like this that day, she should have been the one to die. She was saved by a white bird that straightened out the kidnappers. This white bird turned out to be a boy her own age, and he scared them being even little, and he looked like an angel. Like a beautiful angel with white wings that came to help those in need, just like in the legends. But the girl stopped herself and thought about the fact that there are no such things as angels. If they really existed, then her parents wouldn't have died then. When the boy was dealing with the kidnappers, that if he was really an angel, she asked him to take her with him to where her parents were. But at that moment, one of the kidnappers hit her hard in the face, saying that he would finish her off. When the girl woke up, a man approached her and asked if she was okay, but the girl was very badly wounded and lost a lot of blood. Suddenly, she heard the screams of those very kidnappers, and they were telling them to let them go, and what they even deserved, trying to break free from the shackles. Bessie thought about how glad she was that she was saved, and thought she was going to die. But she was saved. Then she clutched her dress and thought about how she was alone again. Suddenly, she remembered that boy who had saved her, and that's why. She stood up abruptly, looking around, so the man asked her what happened and who she was looking for. Bessie was very upset that that boy hadn't taken her with him, and she wasn't where her mommy and daddy were, so she told the man that he shouldn't have helped her, and she didn't need anyone's help. The man asked how old the little mistress was. The girl said she was 10. The man was very surprised because he thought the girl was older, so he asked her what her name was. The girl replied that her name was Bessie. The man replied that it was a very nice name, and if her parents were here, but the girl just said nothing. The man turned to the girl and said that there is nothing useless in this world, and all meetings in the world have a reason. That's why their meeting has a reason, and he was able to help her, and may one day help him too, and that the girl should not forget about it. But suddenly Bessie cried. The girl came back from her memories and said that all this meeting really had a reason. She looked at the moon sitting on the windowsill. But then she got up and said that she was ready to go. The girl took her suitcase and went outside to the carriage, and it turns out the man who saved her was her carriage driver. 10 days had passed since Victor had sent Bessie the letter, and the girl who had come home after 16 years finally gathered her strength to enter the Crown Prince's chamber. At that moment, Victor was considering whether it would be all right if he brought her in, but if she forced herself in, it would cause a big scandal, so it would be better to bring her in personally. But suddenly, he saw Bessie rushing into the Crown Prince's room. Chris smiled radiantly and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and why shouldn't she have a welcome party to celebrate her arrival and get a little romantic? But Bessie shouted for him to shut his mouth. The knights who were in the Crown Prince's office were shocked by the girl's behavior, to say the least. Bessie turned to Chris and asked, "That is he really so retarded?" But besides, the prince laughed and said that her words are harsh as usual, but that's just her part. The girl said that he crossed the line with his words, and besides, for her, it's more than just her personality. Her brother was shocked at the whole thing, and he grabbed the girl by the scruff of the neck and apologized to His Highness for her behavior and the fact that her little sisters never talked about etiquette. That's why she's so rude. Chris asked what Victor meant and that it was normal between close friends, and did he look so narrow-minded for something like that? Victor was very surprised that they were friends, and Bessie told him not to lie about how they were friends since they didn't even know each other. Chris replied that she was still just as cold, but he liked that about her and that he didn't expect it, that she wouldn't come to see him and that she really missed him. Bessie looked at him angrily and asked madly, and what reason could he have for meeting him besides why she should notify him before coming? Chris replied that she would have to at least try, and then he could prepare for her arrival. The girl thought about it and said that's what she was talking about, because he had forgotten his responsibility to the Silver Eagle Squadron for her sake. Chris replied that she had figured him out and he couldn't hide it anymore, and her instincts were really strong, and asked when she realized them. Bessie replied that right at the beginning, when she found out about the situation in the Veyron, and when she remembered his presence here, it all became clear to her. Chris replied that's why he really liked her. With the fox and the black-hearted serpent looking at each other, the guards could only watch. Bessie turned to the Crown Prince and said that if he really meant what he said, shouldn't he be careful of his surroundings? Chris replied not to worry her and went on. The girl thought about the fact that does he really trust everyone in this room, and even including her older brother? And that was truly amazing. Chris said that he could assume that she was here because of the agreement with his proposal. The girl had assumed from the beginning that Chris had a hand in this, and at first she thought it would be a hassle, and she was reluctant to do it. But taking into consideration how messy disorganized this library was as a scholar, she couldn't let that happen. Said she needed to confirm a few things first, and she meant that recently. There was a fight between the Order of the White Lion and the Order of the Silver Eagle, and only the Order of the White Lion was severely punished, and that's where it all starts. Okay, there was no special choice. Since then, the heads of the Order of the Silver Eagle were either earls or marquises. Chris agreed with the girl and said that they were properly punished. A couple weeks ago, a board member of the Order of the Silver Eagle provoked and picked a fight with a member of the Order of the White Lion in this manner. And so the two orders got into a big fight. The soldiers and the lawmen who were supposed to be the example got involved and gave the pretext for a riot, and the result was just as Bessie said. All the members of the Order of the Silver Eagle were exonerated from punishment, but a member of the Order of the White Lion was stripped of his knighthood. In fact, the member who was stripped of his knighthood was of ignorant origin. All the witnesses to this immediately knew that it was intentional, and because of this incident, there were many objections and commoners, but the Ministry of Justice made a hard-to-measure decision. This incident was resolved as other unforeseen problems always arise. Members of the Order of the Silver Eagle mocked the demoted knight, and because of this, the commander of the White Lion exploded, even though it was an honorable act to stand up for a fallen comrade in such a matter. His method of doing everything just wasn't right. That is physical force. Chris said he thought so too, and if he had sued instead, it would have been easier for him to use his force. It was the first day after the second feud between the two squads. Victor brought Chris a whole stack of complaints from the nobles. Chris said that the problem was that he never sided with the White Lion squad, and it certainly wasn't because he liked the Order of the Silver Eagle differently. Bessie said it must be hard for the soldiers, and sword fighting is more comfortable for them than by words, and anyway, Could it be revenge the order killed in the lion for that incident last month? Chris agreed with her and said that this time the Order of the Silver Eagle and ended up with a harsher punishment than the Order of the White Lion, and in the end the king really wants to restore his image that has been ruined in the eyes of the people. Bessie said that this is also increasing the number of complaints from the nobility, and if such things happen while the country is agitated, then the king will find himself in a difficult position and asked if he thinks his problems are any different from others. Chris replied that he understands most of the problems that arise here, and he has personally seen guilty people and people trying to destroy the library, but why is the Order of the Silver Eagle trying so hard to destroy the library? The girl took a cup of tea and asked that, are they stupid? And they are 5 years old to be proud of showing off their toys. How can the battlefield affect their honor and dignity? Chris replied that he agreed with her and they are very silly. But they are capable of doing things far stupider. And if the library closes, then, for example, fire the deputy squad leader if he goes against them. Responds that this crosses the line, and now she understands why they did it in the end. It's all a real power struggle between nobles wanting to control the future, king demonstrate powers, and the crown princes wanting to show that he is not a toy subject to the nobles. Chris picked up his cup of tea and said that in the end, only the people involved in these problems will lose, and that's why he can't let this continue. When a person or group is able to voice their opinion, power is naturally centered in them. The ideal power structure is when there are no monopolists and everything is divided equally, and that means a balance between the four forces. If they allow the Order of the Silver Eagle to continue to exist, then this balance is bound to be broken. At least they can't be biased. Chris thought about the fact that as a future king, he must into something to look into at this point. Bessie asked that he probably needed her, meaning he needed the witch's help. Chris thought of that smile as if she knew what he was thinking. Bessie said that as she realized that he wanted she had taught the Silver Eagle a lesson so cruel that they dared not dare to be capricious anymore. Chris replied that her wording worried him a little, but more or less he agreed with what she said. The girl sipped her tea and asked if they could discuss a suitable price. Chris said that if it was only money, it was already mentioned in the letter. Bessie said he recommended the post of head librarian to an Ideanum Academy graduate like her, and she thinks her scholarly side realizes that it's true the job is only head librarian, and isn't she needed as a witch? And since he said nasty things to her, she thinks it's only fair if the reward received is whether what is stated in the letter. Agreed with what she said, but said it was just between them. The girl said it was business, and how could he say that since he was the only one who offered to make a contract with the witch, and he is obliged to follow the terms of the witch's payment. Of course, they are strikingly different from the reward he offered. Chris asked what she wanted. In the end, the girl replied that something not exceptional and not uncommon was his promise to give her what she wanted after the business was over. Crown Prince promised her, and at this point, everyone present was shocked. Bessie asked that he didn't agree too easily but her offer, and did he really know what she was demanding from him? Chris replied that it was okay, and even if she cheated on him or someone else, she wouldn't hurt him, and that's why he liked her. Bessie thought about that cunning crown prince who doesn't trust anyone in Chris's position. Trusting someone is like putting your life in someone else's hands, but Chris shows behind that trust in a good way. After that, the girl took out her notebook and started writing the spell. After she wrote it, then she presented one of the knights tried to block her way, but Chris responded by telling him to back off. Bessie told him to sign the contract. Then Chris read the contained on the piece of paper. It said that on Chris Vandevilla's assignment, the witch Bessie Ale would maintain and take care of the Berrien National Library. Chris asked if he could add something. The girl asked what exactly he wanted to add there. Cran the prince replied that when the agreement was over, then Bessie Ale would go out with him. But the girl said that's enough for him to just sign the agreement. Then the piece of paper flew into the air and disappeared. The girl has already sent the agreement to the Castle of the White Moon. The agreement will be locked in the library, taken care of by the witches until time runs out. Chris replied that he knows that this is what she calls a witch agreement and that it was emotional. The girl said that she was warning him that once he signed the contract, he had no right to betray her, and witches are very sensitive to betrayal, and that he must have heard the story of the Kingdom of Eggless. Long ago, the kingdom of Eglis was very famous for the fact that the king was cursed by a witch. Because of this curse, the firstborn son died of an unknown disease. The second son died at the hands of a lover, and the third son died of a traitor because of the endless curse. The king of Eglis tried to give birth to a fourth son, but unfortunately, royal families can only have 4 children. And because of this curse, since the first 3 died or disappeared, the 4th child ascended to the throne, and that's why they talk about the fear of witches. People every time cite the kingdoms and the eye as an example. Chris smiled and said he would never betray her. The girl thought about how she couldn't think of anything more impossible than what he just said, because she remembered it like they were still at the academy. And he smiles as he changes the woman to fit him, and his kind always say words like that. Bessie said it's out of their hands to change the head librarian. Chris said that there has been a vacancy in the position for a long time, and he can easily finish the document with a little power and the minister's seal, and he has already prepared all the necessary documents if she starts the job. As head the day after tomorrow, she can accept congratulations as head of the library. The girl tapped her fingers on her hand and said that although she didn't like the nickname, sometimes witches needed motivation coming from the nickname. She has some issues to deal with before this library is closed for good, and anyway, she's not going to waste her time right now. Bessie turned around and started to leave. Chris asked where she was going, and the girl said she wanted to get it over with and was going to leave. Crown Prince said that they haven't seen each other for so long, and she is going to leave right after the business conversation is over. The girl replied that before she left, she had something to tell him, and she briefly looked in the library while she was on her way here, and she met someone from the Order of the Silver Eagle, and she punished him a little. Chris asked what exactly she did. The girl said it was just a little punishment, nothing more. If someone comes to complain, just take care of them, and it should be easy for him, the Crown Prince. Victor asked if he could go, and Chris replied that he was free to go. When Bessie and Victor left, then Chris said that this woman never changes, and people are capable of making His Majesty express himself like that, and he thought that it was only his twin, the king's second and third child. The knight asked about this woman who was now. Chris said that since he had seen everything with his own eyes, he should understand everything, and she is a witch that has already taken another name. The knight asked if witches are that strong, and Chris said that this witch at the academy, the Crown Prince, said that she is not just a witch, she is on the 2nd place of the Idionum, and taking that into account, it is enough for the main library. The knight said that her ability is more than enough, but is it okay to give this role to her? Chris replied that it's impossible, that it's not her, and Bessie is special because this woman is the savior of his life, and this happy time has really gone by fast, and do they need to go back to the topic they discussed earlier, the errand he mentioned, and it's probably all because of Justin. Chris asked what happened to Justin, and the knight said that Justin doesn't change, and today he came to him and told him that he was completely wrong and that he was wrongly punished. But he wanted to avoid punishment because of the unnecessary behavior he had shown earlier, and he said that he would leave it up to him. Chris said that how dare he threaten the Crown Prince. The knight replied that he didn't mean it, but the Crown Prince laughed and said that it's okay, and Justin is forever like that, and he always says something funny, and he's a good guy, of course, but brings a lot of trouble. And what punishment would come up with this stubborn guy? And if there is a punishment that Justin will bitch about without question, keeping his dignity intact, and he would punish Justin with community service. Knight asked what the Crane Prince meant by public labor. Chris replied that no one in this place wants to take the job, and this one is problematic, and that's where help is needed the most. Bessie was sitting in the library thinking that she has been head of the library all day and still has so much to do, and this place needs cleaning right away and needs some help first. Mrs. Inedith asked if she could clean up with magic. The girl replied that it wouldn't be as effective since she has to spell every detail, and there's some sort of job center or place where people in need of money gather. People so they could find a couple of people willing to help her with the cleaning. Mrs. Inedith said that the place was just as she described, but it felt like their information was strangely mixed up. Bessie then asked her to give her the address of the job center, and she would go and see if there were people there who could help with the situation, and maybe they would be lucky enough to find good people. Mrs. Inedith said that would be very good, but as they were not yet very familiar with the area, she suggested that they take a map, which was made for tourists, so that it should show all the important places, and with only so many symbols, she could be sure of the map. number of symbols she could be sure it would help. The girl thanked her and said she would be on her way. Bessie followed the map and found the place she needed. She entered the room, and at the table sat a guy who was reading a book. After a while, the girl explained the whole situation to him, and the guy said that first he would put her name on the list, and then they would continue, and if there were any vacancies for the job. But Bessie replied that she is here to hire a person, not to get hired. The guy apologized for being rude people she needs, and this question the girl couldn't answer, but she handed him 2 pieces of paper. The guy said they apologize, but it seems they don't have a person that meets her requirements, and if she needs someone like that, this is not the best place to look, and he thinks she should go to the Bureau of Investigation or the Army Workers Association. Bessie said she would go there and asked if he had any references. The guy replied that he had heard there was a place called Silver Diagar, and there was a rumor that they were very good at their job. The girl replied that it sounds like an illegal investigation bureau, and that would be great. Then she asked where she could find them. The guy replied if she knew Julia's apple pie store, and it was a place right across the street from the store. Bessie replied that she thought she could find it and thanked him for his help. When the girl arrived at the designated spot, she was shocked at what a huge line outside the pie store, and even if every dessert store had such a line, and she was here thinking that it wouldn't take that long and that she left on an empty stomach and feeling terrible, and she ended up lining up at the pie store and forgot about the original purpose. When Bessie entered the store, a girl greeted her and offered her a menu. The girl noticed that the place was very crowded inside, and luckily many people take their food with them, so getting a seat would not be a problem. When Bessie went to her table, she saw a familiar man at one of the tables who looked at her and immediately turned away. Bessie thought about what it is, and whether this man is avoiding her on purpose. And even if she is positive, he is clearly not going to be nice, and she really does not like such ignoring. And should she be the first to come up and say hello in a friendly way? But she doesn't understand why he's acting like this in this situation, and it's likely that he's on a date, and it would be a little weird if he was friendly with all the women he barely knows. So it's okay that he's ignoring her, and she'll pretend not to know him too. But for some reason, she was starting to feel weird, like she had sand in her mouth, and something was pressing into her chest. Suddenly, a waitress came up to her and told her that there were no empty tables, and she would have to wait, or she wanted to sit here, or she would be fine if they put her with someone. Bessie nodded in response. The waitress said then she would go and find her a suitable seat. The girl who was sitting at the table with the man asked if Julia had any problems. Julia explained that it was Miss came here to eat, but there was no table available, so she was looking for someone willing to share a seat with her. The girl said that if that was the case, why shouldn't she sit with them? In the end, everyone agreed in a friendly way, but only Bessie and the man were left in an awkward position. After that, the girl invited Bessie to sit down and said that since they were fine with it, she shouldn't worry about them and do as she felt comfortable, and asked Justin about it. Justin agreed with her and called her sister. Julia said that no matter how many times she sees it, Miss really cares a lot about Sir Justin, and a lot of people will think that Justin is her biological brother and not her brother-in-law. Bessie thought about how she was embarrassed to even think about it. At this point, Julia asked if she had already picked out something. The girl said she would like apple pie. Julia asked that she should probably bring a slice of pie, but Bessie replied that she wanted the whole pie. Julia said that if she wanted to order the whole pie, a whole pie is for 4 people, and that's a lot. But Bessie replied that she wanted to eat the whole pie. Julia said that her order would be ready soon. Mrs. said she seems to really like apple pies. In fact, she enjoys apple pies at this place too, and comes here 3 times a week. Bessie looked at Justin, who was drinking tea, and thought about how she wasn't interested in him anyway. The woman said the homemade apple pies were good too, but they were better and warmer here, and every time she missed that feeling, she came here with Justin. Bessie asked that probably her relationship with everyone is so close. The woman said it's because she's embarrassed to come here alone, and usually she comes here with her husband. But right now he's busy and staying home, and luckily Justin will agree to keep her company. After that, Justin said that he had to order more tea, and he would be back soon. The woman said that it was indecent of him to leave them in the middle of the discussion, and she asked him to forgive him, and he was very shy, and that the girl was not offended by his actions. Bessie was very surprised to hear that he was shy, especially when she remembered how he wanted to kiss her, and said she was the one who should be afraid of being unpleasant. Miss asked why they should be uncomfortable, Bessie said, because of their high status. And are they really okay to sit with such a commoner? The woman replied that she understood her, and it was fine, and frankly, socializing with such a young lady was refreshing. Bessie thought about how she guessed that the man was not from a normal aristocratic family, and this woman was different too. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Heine, and also asked Bessie to introduce herself later. She asked if she was a tourist, because she didn't see her coat of arms here. Bessie replied that she was back here and for work. Sarah Heine asked that if she needed to get to the pancake store, it was better if she went there in the middle of the day or in the morning, and that they were so busy all day, they sometimes added just a little bit of whipped cream. So I think it's better to get there about an hour before closing time, at which point Justin joined them, and he listened to the girls discussing the different desserts. And looking at Bessie, he thought that her trivial glasses were annoying, and that he didn't think he would meet her again if it was just a coincidence. It must be very great. Soon, Julia came in with apple pie and tea. Bessie said she didn't think she had ordered apple tea. But Julia replied that it was on the house and she would be thirsty when she had eaten all the apple pie. Bessie thought about what she meant, and at that moment she smelled the aroma of fresh apple pie and all the pain she had to go through to get that pie. Bessie cut off a piece of the pie and tasted it, and it was so delicious that she said it was the best apple pie she had ever had, and she just had to take some pie home. Sarah Heine replied that was a great idea, and she would do that too. Justine, looking at her, thought about the fact that it turns out she could make such a happy face. Sarah Heine said that she would have Julia wrap the pie, so she asked her to stay put and enjoy her pie. As the girl enjoyed her pie, Justin couldn't take his eyes off her, and when he saw that she was smearing herself, he hurried to get the crumbs out of her mouth, and said that she had no sense of etiquette when she ate, but Bessie replied that it didn't matter, and if he had a problem with it. Justine replied that he just wanted to say that it looked gross. The girl replied that if he didn't like it, then let them not look, and why is he sticking his nose in other people's business? Later, Bessie tasted the apple tea, and it turned out to be extremely delicious. And suddenly, Sarah Heine realized that it was Justin who ordered the apple tea, and she didn't know he had such a nice side. Sarah Heine came in with a small gift, and said that she thought their meeting with her was fate-related, so she asked to accept this apple pie as a gift from her. Bessie felt very awkward accepting this gift and thought about the fact that she didn't want this guy to say something annoying. Sarah Heine asked that maybe Bessie and Justin already knew each other, but Bessie hurriedly replied that it was impossible that she could mistake him for someone else. Sarah Heine replied that it was the first time she had ever seen him treat a lady with such kindness, so she thought they might already know each other. Bessie asked that she had called him kind and what it meant. Sarah Heine replied that Justin lives up to his reputation as a great knight, heartless to women's women, convinced of it in tears. But Bessie accepted, even though he's a young master, and he's still a bad guy. Bessie said she understands since he's a soldier, and no wonder he's so tough. Sir Justin is part of the White Lion troop, in which only the best of the best are selected, and he was only 15 years old when he was chosen for knighthood. When he was 20, he could have successfully become the youngest captain ever. The girl thought that if he was the captain of the White Lions, he must be the one the Silver Knights were talking about, the deputy commander of the Order of the White Lions, stripped of his knighthood, and is someone who is on probation supposed to walk around freely. Sarah Heine said that their young master is a very kind, responsible, and competent man, and there are not many men like him in the world. Bessie remarked that that woman seemed to really care about this guy, and if he was so great, why would he show such an unpleasant side of himself, and said that it turned out she was sitting next to such an amazing man, and if she had listened to what her heart was telling her, she would have asked him for a kiss. Justin replied that he had absolutely no intention of kissing her no matter how much she asked for it.